Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our science class, even though it looks a little bit different than what our science class usually looks like. Today's lesson is going to be on erosion, and this is a continuation of our earth science unit that we're doing. So we've talked a lot about different rock formations, things like that, and now we're kind of moving on to bigger picture about what happens when we put all of this stuff together. So today we're going to be talking about erosion, which is super, super awesome. Let's wait till our PowerPoint loads here. So yesterday's homework, as a little recap, was for you to read the article titled "Climate Change is Already Impacting Lake Michigan, Here's How." And we're going to review this article a little bit. This is kind of what it looks like. And if we go back over here, this is what our article looked like, and it talked about some things that we might be familiar with. We might have seen it in the news before, but if you kind of go through and look again, talked a lot about what the Lake Michigan water levels are like. So this article was written in 2019, so fairly recent. And this past summer, we experienced a lot of record high water levels, which is something that has had a big effect on our shorelines and our beaches, like you can see from this picture here. But if you remember some of the things from this article, talked about how they calculated lake levels, and that was with rain, runoff, and then minus evaporation. So that's kind of what they used to measure things in this article. And this was a really interesting graph that I wanted to talk about for a minute. It talked about the Lake Michigan water levels in 1918 through 2018, which is a really long time, 100 years. And you can see kind of where all of these different fluctuations are. And you can see January 2020 is over here. It's kind of projecting into the January 2000. And you can see where it's projecting, but it looks like a general low trend. However, this is over the past 100 years, so it's a very long scale to kind of look at. But if you look, things are spiking rapidly, and this has been the trend. If this graph extended a little bit more, you would see this trend continue to increase. But as we get to kind of towards the bottom, this article starts to mention erosion, and it shows this crazy picture of a pretty steep slope. This is a Central Avenue Beach in the Indiana Dunes State Park, or National Park, actually. So if any of you have been to that location, you kind of know that this is a lot of what the shoreline looks like, very sandy, kind of rocky, sandstone areas, and you can see this in the picture. There's sand just falling off this cliff, and it talks a little bit about erosion and warmer atmosphere, warmer weathers, higher water levels, and kind of putting that all together. And it was a really good article, mentioned a lot of things. Then it goes into what other changes we can expect. This video does a great job of talking about everything pretty much besides erosion. So we are going to look at, I'm going to take myself away here. And we're going to talk about what erosion is today. So erosion is the movement of sediment and other particles after they have been weathered away. So our previous lessons have been talking about weathering, and that is using wind, water, ice, a combination of the things to kind of break away the soil. But erosion is actually the movement or the transportation of soil. And this is what we saw in the article, going back to that picture that I just showed with the sandy beach and that kind of just being whisked away. That is the actual process of erosion, and something that is really familiar to us as we call the Great Lakes home. When we get into oceans and rivers and streams and other bodies of water, that looks very much the same. And so we know that erosion is part of this larger cycle that we've been talking about for the past few days. In last lesson, we talked about weathering. And we can describe what Lake Michigan's beaches are going through by understanding this cycle. And we have a little picture here that really breaks it down. We learned that weathering is what breaks down the rock or the sediment into little pieces. And we know that that happens through wind, water, ice. And today we learned about erosion, and we're kind of still learning about erosion. And erosion is actually what takes it somewhere. It's the movement of the sediment. This is also done through wind, water, ice, gravity, and everything like that. What we will be learning about in the future is deposition, and that is what we'll talk about next. So when we put everything together, yesterday we learned about weathering, and we know that this is the breaking down of rock by wind, water, ice, a combination of 2, 3, all of the things. Today we learned about erosion, the movement of sediment broken down earth by water, wind, ice. We also add gravity to erosion because we have things like cliffs and dunes and hills where movement of particles can go up and down. So you have things that can slide down the hill, down the cliff, whatever, things like that. Over the next few days, we're going to learn about the last part of this cycle, which is deposition. And if you can take a minute, can you try to guess what this might be about? We have breaking down, we have movement. What is deposition? You can kind of tell from the name. Now that you've thought about that for a second, we can always remember this cycle by these 3 letters, W-E-D. When in doubt, remember the W-E-D, the WED cycle. But before we go, we're going to take a little trip really quick so you can all see something you might not have seen before.
Miss Brooks, why are you out here in a life jacket? Why don't you have your nice teacher clothes on? What's going on out here? Well, today you're going to get a chance to look at what we've been talking about in class for the past few days in real life. So the topic of today's lesson has been erosion, and we know that the erosion is the weathering of soil through the elements, whether that be wind, whether that be water, a combination of both. We're out here on Lake Michigan today to show you a real life version of this and something that is affected by both wind and water. So if you look up here on the shoreline, we have an awesome example of some erosion going on. The article that you just read was about this erosion on the Michigan shorelines, how our beaches are disappearing, how houses are falling in to the shoreline. We're just losing shoreline pretty rapidly at this rate. So you can see kind of what that looks like in real time here. You have a bunch of trees up there on the top of the cliff. Then you have the erosion of the soil underneath. You can see a really nice distinct ledge, and that is partially due to the wind and that's partially due to the waves, a combination of both. You see we have this big lake, and this is not just unique to Lake Michigan. There's a lot of different lakes, there's a lot of different rivers. Erosion works in the same sort of way. Whenever you have wind, water, your elements put together, they're really hard on the soil. And it depends. This is a really bad area that's been affected because you have such loose, sandy soil. But in different parts of the world, or in different parts of the United States even, the more rocky, sturdy soils are a little less subject to erosion. We'll kind of take a look at that in the lab that we're going to be doing next with our erosion table, kind of testing what elements make what types of erosion. If we got up really close, you'd be able to see really nice striations in the rocks. You can see different rocks that have been exposed. And this is just another way that we can kind of get a glimpse into what Earth's crust looked like. Another thing you can see if we get really close here is actually where the water has trickled down. This is a really smooth day out here on the lake, but Lake Michigan is kind of aggressive at some points. We get waves, bigger waves, 5-6 footers. Today we don't really have any waves, just a little breeze going, but you can see how as water levels change and as these waves change, you can definitely get the picture of where this erosion is happening on the shore.
So today we reviewed the article that we read for homework, and hopefully you got some of your questions answered about that, got a little bit better sense of what that article was about. We also learned about erosion and how it fits into the WED cycle. We reviewed weathering and added some definitions to our list. And lastly, we took a look at what this looks like in real life. You got to kind of see me out there in my element. Tomorrow we will learn about deposition and the last step of the WED cycle. We'll also discuss some factors that affect things like weathering and erosion and deposition after we learn about it. And we'll begin to put everything all together. And oh, you can't really see this last little bit down here. Hold on. And then we have some things to look forward to. We have a live hands-on demonstration of the wet cycle coming soon, where we're going to build some models and actually test out what this looks like. And we also have a big problem-solving, real-world thinking example situation that we're going to work through and kind of use our brainstorming skills to put all of this together at the end. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. I hope you have a great rest of your day. I will see you later.